All right, guys, I think we are now live on the site. I want to welcome everybody. It is another Wednesday night conversations with Cougars, and I'm so pleased to have who I think was the best leg for about 4 years in the state in the late 90s, early 2000s, Brian Jackson. And I want to welcome you, Brian, and thank you for spending some time with us tonight.
Yeah, excited to join and be on and talk about some Cougar history.
That's right. And guys, Brian, 99 to 02, Brian was part of at Northview and created some school records and maybe even some Wiregrass records that we'll get into. But Brian, before we jump back and talk about your times with Coaches Latta and Dubose, tell folks a little bit about what you're doing now and your family life and those kind of things.
Yeah, sure. So Brian Jackson, graduated 03, but now I am live here locally, in Dothan, and I work at Houston Academy. I'm the marketing communications director there, and also teach a couple elective classes, some digital media, entrepreneurship type stuff, and I also run a kicking academy, Team Jackson Kicking, and I've really enjoyed training kids and helping the next generation of specialists. And my wife Stephanie and I have two boys, 6-year-old and 2-year-old, Corbin and Carter. And so, of course, I've thrown the soccer ball out there, and the golf clubs and stuff like that, and just had them, playing around and all that. But they like music too. I was a band guy as well, and my brother was 4 years older than me, graduate at Northview. He was really big in the band, so it's really kind of cool to see. Now I'm in my mid-30s, seeing a lot of my friends and alumni at Northview. A lot of us still live here in town in Dothan, and so it's just exciting, and it's really kind of cool to see things progress as a father and husband and a coach.
Very cool, very cool. And we're going to get into the kicking training and the student athletes who you've been training in a few minutes. But what I want to ask you, Brian, is how did you develop your love for kicking? Is it a family thing that's been passed down, or did you just fall in love with the sport, or where did all the origin of you kicking come from, and at what age did you start?
That's a great question. To be quite honest with you and everyone watching, and I don't even know if really anyone really knows this about my personal interests, but I would say all the way to age 13, baby at age 13, I actually disliked the sport of football. I was not a fan of football. I thought soccer ruled the world, and I was a soccer guy, a Dothan Shockers guy. And so actually, it's a unique story, and I don't know if you want me to go into it or not, but at around age 13 and a half, 14 is when I developed my love for kicking. And, shortly after that, football, where I really, started to learn the X's and O's and all that. And I attribute that a lot to Coach Latta. I really, to be honest, about 13 and a half years old is when I started taking an interest in the sport of football.
Do you remember an event or something that just kind of clicked in your head that just said, I think I want to start doing that?
Right. So for those that are watching that may remember this, and I don't exactly know what it was like in the 90s or like late 80s or 90s, but I went to Girard 6th and 7th grade, and then went to Carver in 8th grade.
Okay.
And so Coach Ferris, I'm pretty sure it's Coach Ferris.
Mike Ferris.
Right. So he had a tremendous influence on me in 8th grade at Carver. And whenever we would do PE and kind of more of the fun type stuff, where there'd be like 1 or 2 days of the week where it was more lax and more fun at PE, as far as recreational and what we wanted to do. He would try me out to punt the ball or kick the ball, and he would, he was very graceful. He was like, you should really try kicking, and I was like, nah, I don't want to play football, and so the unique story was, like, my brother was 4 years older than me, and so he was playing at Northview as a soccer player. And my dad and mom worked at Fort Rucker as DoD civilians, and we moved from Enterprise to Dothan and made that transition. So my brother was playing soccer there, and my dad was a very talented soccer coach for many years in the Wiregrass here. And so once he and Coach Latta started getting to know each other at Northview, Coach Latta became the school sponsor for the sport of soccer. And, knowing Coach Latta was probably like, hey, I'm going to learn as much as I can about soccer from Coach Ken Jackson, my brother and I's dad. And also I may get a couple of athletes from the soccer team to come over to football too. And with the endurance and stamina and things of that sort and speed. So I actually went to soccer practice, and we didn't have a JV team in the late 90s for soccer. So I would just kind of play around on the side field, and every once in a while I'd be allowed to go in and scrimmage or something like that with the soccer team, but not play any games because we weren't allowed to do that. And Coach Latta saw that I kicked the ball really far, and so he's already thinking in his mind who's going to be kicking in the next 3 or 4 years, which is very common in football, where they see the soccer players kick a ball far, and it's just a smooth transition over. And it was just the way Coach Latta talked to my dad and talked to me, and he just said, this coming up summer before you're a freshman at Northview, just come out, and I just want to see if you can try to kick it between the uprights. Like, don't worry about the hitting part and the pads and all that. I just want to see if you can make it. And I think what was key was, like, I wonder if you can kick a 50-yard field goal, and I think that his angle at me that way kind of made it more like competitive for me. The thought of like getting tackled or having to wear these pads that stink and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting when you're a soccer player and you've been doing that for 14 years of your life, and now you're going to play football. It's very intimidating. And so as soon as I got out there and kicked and made a couple kicks, I grew in. I had a passion and fell in love with the competition of trying to kick it between 24 feet, in high school, at the high school level, and just the way the ball felt when you made good contact and you kick a ball, 50, 60 yards. That's when I really grew in love with it, growing into my freshman year in 99 at Northview.
Well, I got a couple of comments. I know you may know them personally, the Lopez brothers, who kicked at Northview well before you. Clark and Alan Lopez started out in soccer, and then they both, being brothers, were 5 years apart, got to kick in the state championship games. Alan was in the 81 team and Clark was in the 85 team, and they're going to come on in January, both of them together. So I'm looking forward to talking with them. But here's my question for you, Brian. You're 13 and 14. You're kind of getting a little taste. Coach Latta is testing you a little bit, challenging you a little bit. I want to know what your soccer teammates and your soccer buddies thought about you skipping out on soccer and or adding football at this point. Did you catch some flack from those guys?
No, I didn't. I think mainly because it was a spring sport, so soccer was in the spring, football was in the fall. I did catch that going into my senior year, which we'll probably get into later, but I really didn't. I had to make a tough decision in the fall as far as travel league soccer. We used to play Dothan Shockers, was real popular, and I played with Todd Mannering and Sebron Wood and Raleigh Price, Adam Rollins, a lot of phenomenal soccer players that went through Northview. And I had played for the Capital City Streaks in Montgomery, and so my parents just said, hey, you're going to have to make a decision, and they had already done all the research on the amount of scholarship opportunities and college opportunities to play football as a specialist compared to playing soccer. It was just a vast difference. In soccer, there's 22 players vying for 11 athletic scholarships, and a majority of the time they divvy up those, or even they'll give it to international players. So once we kind of caught wind of that after freshman year, I just said, no to the travel team. But no, I never caught any flack from the guys. I did going into my senior year.
It's what you're talking about is the difference between revenue sports, basketball and football, most notably, versus non-revenue sports. Baseball has to divvy up a certain number of scholarships, soccer, et cetera. So I understand what you're saying. And I'm sure that was not easy when you had to ultimately make that decision, but was back in that time, Brian, was travel soccer more competitive than the high school level soccer in Alabama?
They're both competitive, but it always seemed like travel soccer was more competitive and had the best avenue of trying to play collegiately.
Mhm.
I still think it's like that today, to be quite honest with you. I mean, there's still some quality high school soccer, but it just seems like travel soccer, ODP, and things of that sort were always the best avenue to try to get looks at the college level.
When did Northview start with its soccer program, if you know?
I actually don't know that. I wish I did. Uh,
Because I
I just
know it
know that.
wasn't there. I graduated in 86. My brothers graduated in 89 and 93. And I don't think we had soccer even when David, my youngest brother, graduated. So it had to have been, I guess, when you were probably in either elementary or middle school in sometime in the 90s is when they must have started it. So it was, I guess my point being is, at least in the southeast part of the state, I guess it was still a growing and up and coming sport. And I'm sure it was hard to take some of the athletes off of the different teams out there or pull them from travel to field a soccer team. But here's my question for you is, you had guys come off the soccer team to play football, or was it reverse? Or did you have that? Were there guys who tried to do both besides yourself?
My brother was on. So my brother was, I think, like 96, 99, maybe. He graduated in 99, JJ Jackson, and he's here locally too with his family. And we see each other all the time. But I think it was 97 or 98, one of those years, they went all the way to the state championship game against Grissom. And we were winning 2-0. And so it was going to be the first state championship ever for Northview for soccer. And I would imagine then, it would have been in the mid 90s then is when it started. I'm sure maybe someone on the thread can comment. Yeah. But and then someone ended up getting a red card for putting number one up in the air after one of the goals. And we were down a man. But a majority, like I would probably say 4 or 5 of those players on the soccer team were phenomenal football players. Shane Bryant is his name that kind of rings the bell. We had 4 or 5 football players, big, fast, strong dudes that could play soccer. And so I would say, like, before I got on there were some football players that played soccer. And then when I got there, it was so tough to try to get soccer players over to football. And I, even in the 2000s, I would still say that it's been tough to try to get those guys over.
Well, I know that at least when I was growing up, and maybe even still today, that a lot of college coaches, regardless of the sport, they want their athletes who are going to be playing for them to be exposed to multiple sports as opposed to just doing one sport all year round. I think you kind of get burnt out. Maybe there's a repetitiveness of the types of motions that your body does, and you don't want to overuse them. But we played the sport of whatever was going on that season.
Right.
In the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. And like I said, we didn't have soccer just yet. But from your experience, did you play other sports? Were you exposed to, say, baseball or other sports during your middle school years?
Yeah, I played baseball, in middle school and played soccer and then got into football. But, I was just mainly a band guy and a soccer guy. And then, I honestly don't know what I would have played in the fall if I didn't have football. I mean, I probably would have just kept playing travel soccer in the fall. And, I see bowling is a sport that's been pretty popular at Northview. And that would have been a lot of fun to do that in the winter and whatnot,
Yeah, we certainly didn't have that back in the day. But let me ask you about the cross training or the thought process or maybe muscle memory. When you're punting, that's a different action from kicking on the football field, which is a different action from some of the types of kicks you may do in soccer. So how did you train yourself for the disciplines needed for punting versus place kicking versus kicking in different ways when you're actually playing on the soccer?
So, playing soccer, it's just so easy to get soccer players to transition over to kicking a football because when you're playing soccer, when you're going to strike the ball, let's say I'm trying to hit a goal kick to midfield, I'm going to come at the ball at a little bit of an angle, to to kind of get some more torque, just kind of like a golf swing, and try to develop some power to kind of rotate my body around. And in soccer, you're just playing soccer. You're running around, sprinting, jogging, passing. You may do an instep, soft finesse pass. You may do a power shot in the upper 90. You may try to curve a cross kick over, and you're just doing so many different foot angles, but you're not really thinking about that when you're playing soccer. When you go to kicking, now you have to put the ball into a certain spot, whether it's kicking a field goal or kickoff or punt, as a majority of y'all know. So now you need to dial in your step progression back and over, or if it's punt, making sure you're walking a straight line. And you just have to be more aware of what your feet are doing. And a lot of soccer players that come to kicking for football, they don't know that. They have to be taught exactly what type of foot angle they need to have if they're trying to, hit a 65-yard kickoff, or, if they're trying to do a sky kick, a little pooch kick to the right, 40 yards up in the air, your foot angle is going to be completely different. And so that's really been important with the kicking side. Punting is just a whole nother beast of its own. I actually think punting is a lot harder to learn than kicking, just because there's so many intangibles. Just if it's a pro style punt and we're just walking straight to the long snapper's rear end, 2.5, 3 steps, punters need to understand they have to walk straight on their train tracks. So when their swinging leg comes up, right foot to right eye, if they're a righty, that's going to help them try to get a better spiral turning down and over. But what a lot of us do is we like to step over to the right and then come back across our body. And what that does is now our hip is kind of shifted out right, and we fall back, and the ball comes up and down left. And so that's just one little ingredient for punting details. I mean, it's just so tough. But in the NFL and college, and arguably high school, for sure NFL college, you have to directionally punt. If you're on the right hash and the coach wants you to put it on the right numbers, you have to walk your fine line, and then you have to have a really nice drop, or a steady drop. You can't drop it up here by your head and have the nose going everywhere. You have to kind of come out from the waistband and just be comfortable dropping. But a lot of kickers, they don't understand too that you need to be able to catch the ball, and so you can sit there and hit a bomb.
You see the punter take his eye off of it because he's looking up, or just for whatever reason, right through their hands or right through their legs. It happens so often, much more often than I would think that it should.
The best special teams coordinators in the country right now have every kicker punter on their roster, even if they're not a punter, on the jugs machine twice a week at least, just getting 100.
Now, you can explain for those who don't know, what's the jugs machine?
Yeah, it's like kind of like the blue machine with the tires, and it just flings footballs up in the air for the returners to catch it. We would turn around and use that for punters and have a nice snap right to the punter to be able to catch the ball, just because, we tell kickers and punters, you're never going to get to see the field on a punt team if you can't even catch the football in shoulder pads and helmet, so that's number one. If you can't do that, you're not going to play football. Number two, you can't take 6 steps to punt a ball because you got 8, 9 dudes coming at you different angles to block. So if you're trying to cover 6 yards of ground, you're not going to play. So you have to take 2.5 to 3 max yards to punt. And then now you have to actually punt the ball with decent hang time and distance. And then number 4, you need to put it where the coach wants it. So, punting is just so much more difficult than kicking, in my opinion.
And that's even on the high school level. But let me ask you, Brian, did you ever get a chance to meet Larry Roberts or see him play on film?
I never did. No, sir.
Well, guys, if you don't know, Brian is who broke Larry's longstanding 50 or 51-yard kicking record back in the day, I believe. Larry was part of the 81 state team. He's arguably the greatest Northview Cougar player ever. Went on to Alabama, played in the pros for several years, and won a Super Bowl title with the 49ers back in the day. But sadly, Larry passed away a few years ago. But I didn't know if you knew he was a straight-on kicker. And when was the last time you saw a straight-on kicker back in the day?
Like when was the last time I've seen a straight-on kicker, like in general, or just?
Yeah, are there any today?
Yeah, I see them every summer, and they're mainly down here in the South. I rarely see them in the Midwest or West Coast.
Now, do they permit now back in the day, they used to, it would be like a steel toe that was cut off, if you will, or at a plate, I think it was at the end of the shoe. And I hope Coach Hicks comes on. He was Larry's kicking coach at the time. I think Larry would actually tie with a shoelace the end of the shoe back behind his calf.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you ever saw that or if you still see any version of that today, but that was not the norm, but that's the way Larry kicked at the time.
Yeah. And I don't want how I kind of came off to perceive anyone the wrong way. It's very rare to see it these days, of course. But yes, I'm not like this past summer, I saw one toe kicker at training, so it's still kind of common, but what you're referring to is that it's a type of a cleat that you put on, and when you're toe bashing a kick, you want the ball slightly angled back, actually, so that way when that square toe comes up, it's hitting the very bottom and hitting kind of where the most air at is inflated, and that's how you get the trajectory and the distance. And so when you would lace it on the calf, it would flip the toe up of the shoe, and that's why they would have the laces behind the calf.
Brian, I would never want to be the holder for a toe kicker. I would be, because I held in college, I would be so fearful of getting just crushed.
Yeah.
But what about if you remember in the 70s, 80s, there were a few, Tony Franklin, Russell Erskine, some others were barefooted kickers. Is that even permissible these days on any level? Do you ever see that?
Yeah, I still see it every once in a while. When a guy is like crunching hardcore and collapsing his upper body down to try to kick it farther, we actually will tell guys to take their shoes and their cleats and their socks off and try to kick barefoot, not to have them kick with their bare foot, meaning like in a game, but they're going to be more aware of standing a little more tall because they're going to be worried about slipping. So when a guy's crunching and collapsing down on his body because he thinks that's going to make him kick farther, if he's a really bad cruncher, we'll have them take their cleats off and do that. Now, as far as a barefoot kicker, you either it's like you enjoy kicking that way or you do not. It hurts my navicular bone on my foot. It hurts. I can't do it. But those guys that could, it just wouldn't bother them. And
I guess they somehow they've got to toughen up the top part of that foot because it just looks like one of those guys. It may have been Tony Franklin, may have kicked up in Philadelphia, and I'm thinking, how in the world can you kick in that type of environment? With the snow and whatever else they're dealing with. But let's come back to your freshman year, and I appreciate all of your lessons and your history about this. To me, this is so fascinating. But your freshman year, were you competing for a varsity kicking spot, or were you on the JV or ninth grade? Take us into that time period for you.
Yeah. So again, like Coach Latta got me hooked in the end of spring or in the summer going into my freshman year. And Darren Flory was the kicker at the time. He was, I think, a junior, and tall, lanky guy, really phenomenal soccer player. And he was same deal. He was brought over, but he was nursing a groin injury to start that season too. And Coach Latta just had told me, hey, you're probably going to get some reps with the freshman team, the JV games. But I want to make sure that you're at the first game of varsity because, right now you're our backup kicker and Darren's the starter and he's a little injured. Now, I didn't know that he was injured at the time. I just thought I was getting moved up to varsity just to maybe just get the experience. And so I don't know if you know this, but we played Grissom, the defending state champions, that first game of that season. And we had Rip Hughes completely packed. I mean, jam packed. I would argue 7,000 or 8,000 people were in that venue. Wow. Because everyone knows there's 5,000 on each side, on each slab, and our side was for sure packed. And I think Grissom, they brought a lot of people down too, and we brought that game to the very end of regulation for a chance to win the game. And Coach Latta said, "Hey, you're going in to hit the game-winning field goal," And so I'm like, and my dad was the kicking coach. My dad was there with us, and I didn't know. I didn't even know what operation time meant. So I mean, I'm sure Coach Latta maybe, I was 13, going on 14 years old, so I don't think I really fully comprehended what a snap to the holder holds it, the kicker kicks it, and it needs to be 1.3 seconds, 1.25 seconds of that time. I don't think that was really discussed with me like in a way that I would comprehend it, maybe, so I was like a 1.6, 1.7 get off, so I was very slow. The ball was on the tee before I even left, and they came off the edge and just completely blocked it. So then we went to overtime. They scored, hit the pat, and then we scored, and Coach Latta tried for 2, and we lost. We didn't get it, but that's how I entered football in my life, was a game-winning attempt against the defending state champions, and my first kick, I got blocked.
13 or 14-year-old, you probably were so green to the sport that maybe a lot of what you didn't know, you just didn't know, and maybe blissfully unaware a little bit. But do you remember having the time to even comprehend as you're jogging out there? Or maybe, I don't know if you looked up or took in the surroundings when you were on the field, or you were really focused on the task at hand, but do you remember any of that feeling?
No, I didn't really have, I didn't have any prep time. There was no thoughts. It was just, as far as I'm here at the game, and it was maybe a minute before the kick, I was told, hey, you're going out to kick, because Darren's, his groin was messing up. It was flaring up on him. And, and so I just remember crying like a baby on the sideline after a miss. And, Dad was having to console me and all that. Cause I'm like, gosh, I'm just let the whole team down and let all these people down. Like, I'm probably going to get beat up in school the next day, cause it's football in my mind. But no, everyone was very supportive. I didn't have any issues. Everyone was cool. And like, I think the next week, I think I started on everything. I think Darren's groin injury was not good. And I think the rest is history from there.
Well, I was just getting ready to say, boy, you got thrown right into the so-called lion's den, but you didn't take very long to adjust to it. And Brian, before we keep going, we got some Cougar greats in here. I want to say hello to Kevin Jackson. What's up, KJ? Thanks for stopping by. Coach Janaski Fleming is with us. Just some awesome fellas who both been on this show with me in the past. And of course, I'm talking with Brian Jackson. We're in the 99 season, his freshman year with Coach Latta. Just played Grissom, and now we're getting into the season. And as the season went on, Brian, from a confidence standpoint, did you notice any difference in your thought process? Were you challenged during your freshman year to take any other big kicks or distance kicks?
In freshman year, I think what the biggest confidence boost for me were kickoffs. And, Coach Jackson, Coach Fleming are on, and others that may be viewing, like we're a very short family. I'm like 5'6.5". My dad's 5'6". My brother's 5'8". We're all short in my family. Mom's 5 foot. So I hit the growth spurt pretty quickly in 8th grade and 9th grade, and that was about it. Everyone else sprouted up after that. But with soccer combining, and then my growth spurt combining, and then you threw in strength and conditioning with Coach Latta, like my kickoffs just, were what normally you would see, like with Jack Martin, that we'll talk about in a minute. Like, he didn't start hitting touchbacks till junior year of high school, and he's 6'3" now. I hit my growth spurt at a younger age and hit the strength and conditioning. Usually with kickers, when the strength and conditioning and the growth spurt hit and mesh, that's usually when you start seeing 7 to 10 more yards. So I was hitting touchbacks freshman year, and so that was nice. So that was a huge confidence boost, because everyone was explaining to me, like, you're helping our defense out. Like, dude, we don't even have to, we're going to still run down the field on cover team, but like we can kind of tell the ball is going in the end zone. So now we can just play defense and make the other team go 80 yards, etc. So I think that was really huge for me. I don't recall any like big time game winning or game tying type kicks freshman year. But I think the kickoffs were huge. And then I think really even getting in my bag on sky kicks and surprise onsides, and kind of bringing the soccer esque type skill, and then Coach Latta and Coach Griffin, And then, Coach Jackson was our special teams coach my junior and senior year, maybe. I know for sure my senior year, Coach Jackson was our special teams coach with Coach Griffin. But that was a lot of fun when coaches were like, hey, show us what kind of skill onside kicks can you do to the right, or surprise dribble middle, or even the little sky pooch kick rights. That was a lot of fun for me. So I think those and the kickoff team really developed my confidence.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. You really were. You developed into a weapon for the team. And particularly, like you said, it helped out the defense. Back in the day, were the uprights 24 feet back during your time period?
So yeah, in '99 they were the same height, upright, same width as what they're out there today.
Oh, so it really hadn't changed in 25, 30 years. I know that, or at least I assume, I know the hash marks have moved in college and in pros, and I want to say the uprights have also narrowed, but we can talk about that in a few minutes. Brian, what was it about kicking that really, and really that set you apart in the school? You were now being known for playing on the soccer team. People knew your dad, of course, your brother. But what was it about being an accomplished kicker in 9th grade, 10th grade, and playing on the varsity? That's a big deal for a 6A program. Not many kids get moved up regardless of your position. But what was it that you were seeing or feeling that, I don't know, maybe gave you a little extra, little extra in your step, gave you some more confidence among your peers, non-football folks?
Yeah, Dad was always real big. Dad worked with the Army and the military for so many years, so he was always big on just harping on being humble, and just don't get the big head. You're starting as a freshman, that's great, but we already know what it feels like to miss a field goal, so or even get a field goal blocked. But still, a miss is a miss. Once it hits the foot and it didn't go between the uprights and the crossbar, you have to take that as a miss as a kicker, regardless. You can't have moral victories because of a guard or bad op time, yada, yada. So I think he just instilled that in me at a young age. He taught me all the time, if you mess up or if you do really good, always keep your head up, always say yes or no, sir. Look at the coaches in the eye. So I think just kind of having that mentality and mindset in the hallways too, yeah, I mean, I had confidence, may have had a little bit of swagger, but I didn't feel like at the time there, I didn't feel like that was something that I had like leverage over my peers or felt like I was better than anyone else. Like, I started learning what being a kicker was like on a football team and kind of the stereotypes and the stigmas. And I've also learned that just comes with the territory, like it's almost kind of comical. And if I've learned over the years, if you can show your teammates and your coaches that you can take some of the jokes and all that, like, if they don't like you, they will not talk to you. So if they're going to kind of pick on you and make fun of you, like 9 times out of 10, they like you. They're trying to warm up to you and try to figure you out. So that's one thing that I've taught kickers over the years is don't get so defensive towards coaches and your teammates. Like, it's okay to get called kicker, and like, I had 2 nicknames, you asked me the question earlier. I had two nicknames. I rarely was ever called Brian during my career at Northview. I was called Kicker and I was called Foot. And if Coach Jackson and Coach Fleming are on here, I think they may remember me like being called Foot, and so I took that, like, I guess I just knew naturally, like, that was kind of cool. Like, and even
they accepted you.
Yeah, they accepted me. And, I didn't take it as like, I'm just the kicker. It was so much, and I guess this goes back to your question. It had so much of an influence that my license plate, when I finally got to drive, was Kicker 20. So, obviously, I don't think I would have put Kicker 20 on my license plate if I thought I was getting made fun of. So,
well,
yeah, it was nice.
The kicker, the holder, the snapper, you spend 95% of your time away from the rest of the team every practice because you're doing your craft at one end of the field or the other. And during the practices at Northview, did you have any other places where you could go, or were you limited to just at the one practice field?
Well, Coach Latta had said from the jump, like, hey, you're part of the team. Yes, I know you're not. Now, actually, he he had promised me that I would not have to get in offense and defense and hit anyone. But once he started seeing that I enjoyed, the competitive side of kicking, I had asked him if I were ever to play football. And, it's funny I say that, right? To play football. Because in my mind, I thought kicking was kicking and playing football was playing football.
Right.
Right. It's still kind of like that, to be quite honest with you. I said, where would you play me? And he's like, well, you're short and stocky and you're quick. And so, and the way his offense was ran with, I forgot the exact name of the offense that Coach Latta ran, but you had, back on the left, back on the right, and you had a back in the middle. He wanted me at the back on the left. And so I tried a couple plays, and as soon as I got popped and got hit, like it did not feel good. And so from there, I did not dabble with it. But he had said, hey, look, at practice, you're always going to be up here on, you're not going to go to the softball field or go to travel soccer practice. This is a team sport. You are with us. Your dad knows a lot of drills from some of the kicking camps that he went to from Carol White Kicking Academy. That was the only kicking academy, to my knowledge, in the Southeast in the summer. So he had about 15 sets of drills that he would just run me through. And then my dad was really big on rep count. And so the good thing is like we learned at an early age back then, where really it was unheard of to have someone count, if you kick the ball 80 times that day or 120 times or 60 times, that's where kickers and even coaches don't really realize, because they're counting on the kicker, kind of tell them, like, that's where kickers start getting injuries or can't hit touchbacks in November, because they're not keeping count of their rep count. And so dad was really big on, dad's all about routine. So he was really good at making sure. So Coach Latta, Coach Griffin, Coach Jackson, like, they didn't have to worry about what we were doing the other 18 periods, compared to the two periods of kicking and punting. So, cause and then in any conditioning, I always did all the conditioning that everyone else did. And that was just because you're on a team and you're doing a team thing. And so that's just how it was back then.
It's like a pitcher in baseball. It's like a quarterback, a number of throws. You can overuse that leg, I'm sure, which can lead to some type of a tendonitis or a hyperextension and those kind of things. So I'm sure that back then, the average coach had no clue or concept about how to deal with kickers. So I know they were blessed to have your dad around to be able to help guide some of those actions that you were doing. But I want to take it to, I know you had multiple 50-yard plus kicks. I want to ask you, were those your most memorable, or was there a clutch kick that you really remember that either won a game, tied a game? May not have been that long, but it was maybe a pressure-filled situation that really kind of puts a smile on your face whenever you get a chance to think about it.
I'd like to talk about the 50-yard field goals, but to answer the question directly about the most memorable experience, was actually an onside kick. And it was senior year, so it would have been the 02 season against Dothan High. Obviously, not a lot of fun those couple of years, because we just had a lot of losses consecutively. So of course, going into D High at the end of the season, of course we were slated to lose bad and all that. But to start the game, Coach Griffin, said, "Hey, we're going to be doing surprise onside left." And for everyone that's watching, like, as a right-footed kicker, when you're trying to come up to the tee and then kind of come around and kick back to the left, it's tough, just to even hit that kick accurately. B, it's really tough on the kickoff cover team, especially the left side, because it takes about an extra second or so to come around the ball and kick back left. And so those guys, oftentimes, they won't delay, and they'll jump off sides, they'll run off sides before the ball is even kicked. And so, but the coaching staff, at the time was, all coaches that I've been with have always kicked their onside kicks towards their sidelines. And I didn't understand that back then, but now being around coaches, it makes complete sense, because sometimes you kind of have a little more sway, like if there's referees on that sideline and the onside kicks are going towards that sideline. And I think that's a really cool tactic. I don't know if it's necessarily been used, but also you kind of get a better look, like if they're coaches, and maybe we were really strategic with our coaches. Like, we would have certain coaches standing at certain spots to know where I needed to hit like a sky kick or hit an onside kick. And so that was kind of cool. So Coach Griffin said, hey, we're starting off surprise left. Just come around, hit it, and see what happens. So D high, a lot of people there. We recover it. It was a terrible onside kick. I hit it about 20 yards downfield. They just mishandled it, and we jumped on it. Everyone went completely nuts. Everyone was excited. Here's the flag, and there's like, hey, jumped off sides. We got to move it back to the 35-yard line. Okay, so now it's like, dang. All right, now so. At the time, Coach Griffin's like call, like when he did this, all right, like to me, that was deep. Like we're just going deep, but he would normally point
Right.
deep, but he did this. And in my mind, I thought, do that again. So the sideline or the coaches, at least the coaching staff, were like, we're going deep. He can kick it. He can kick it 65 yards.
Right.
We'll just go deep and get touchback.
Right.
I was like, all right, boys, we're doing this again. Like, here we go, onside left. We're just doing the exact same thing here. And so it was a much better kick. It got fumbled around. We recovered it. Our complete sidelines erupted. Our side of the stadium erupted. We started off the game with so much momentum. And Coach Griffin was going nuts. He was excited. So when I went over to him, I was like, that was great. And he was like, yeah, that was great. But you didn't do the call I told you to do. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, I said deep. And I was like, Coach, you said do it again. He was like, it don't matter. We got the ball. Who cares? And so
I can hear Coach Griffin in that as his voice gets higher. I love it when he used to get animated. Oh, so awesome. So awesome. Well, Brian, take us to your deep kicks, the long field goals, the 50-pluser.
Yeah, and I had asked you right before the interview, like just to make sure on Bubba. Bubba was our AD at Northview when I was there. And I had kicked in a JV game my sophomore year, and I hit a 51-yard field goal in a JV game my sophomore year. Okay, and that was great. It was cool. It was exciting. Like again, my dad's a big statistician, but he didn't have. I don't know if he had that data from Bubba. So fast forward a year, my junior year, and we're playing. I want to say it was like Opelika at home, maybe Central Phoenix City. It was again just a game where we were struggling a little bit, but when we crossed the 50, Coach Latta was like, "Hey, if we have a chance for a long one, I'm going to give you an attempt. So just be ready." And I actually didn't kick it very well. It was a very high snap, and Dustin Pruitt was able to get it down, and I just kind of came around it pretty bad on the right panel. Luckily I did, because there was about 3 massive defensive linemen that came through both of our guards and straight up the middle. And I actually kicked it over our like left tight end. I didn't mean to. It was a very high snap, and I kind of got around it. And I actually did one of those kind of like knuckleball left to right kicks and just got fortunate. And it just was a line drive, ugly kick, and went right over the crossbar. And really that it's cool having the 54-yard field goal and all that, but the funniest part of this was the following Monday, showing up to school, and Bubba was like, he's very animated too, and he was like, Brian, you have the record. You have the record at Northview. And I'm like, what, like the field goal? And he was like, yeah. He was like, I was like, which record did I break? He's like, you broke your own record. And I was like, when did I break a record? He was like, last year when you hit a 51-yarder. And I was like, what? Like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, I thought you knew. So like, it was just funny because it was like a typical Bubba thing that like, he assumed that I knew, I didn't know anything. And then it was just kind of comical because that's how he was. So
that record, Larry, I think, kicked his 50-yarder maybe in 81. So that record held for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Through. I want to go back to onside kicks and tell me if you've ever seen this, and maybe it's more common than I think. I once fair caught an onside kick that was a pooch in college, and it was against Ole Miss, and I saw all the guys coming right at me, and I wanted no part of that, so I just threw up the fair catch, caught it, gave it to the ref. And the guys were just so deflated because they didn't touch me. But how common, do you ever see that type of, fair catch on a pooch? And I was in the second level of the hands team, but do you ever
Right.
see?
Yeah, I mean, so the way it's working now is you have to find an open space where there's not a guy there, and you're trying to get the kicker to kind of almost do like an alley oop, like if you're Kobe, you're trying to, alley oop to Shaq, like you kind of have to put it on a line a little bit, but once you get it up too high, we as the cover team can't make contact with you, or it's a bad penalty. So, but if you can catch the return team and they're not in that spot and you can place it in there, they may not know that they can fair catch it unless it has kind of that lob type,
Brian,
higher type elevation to it.
I didn't know. And it's
Yeah.
a good thing that I did, because my mom was in the stands and those Ole Miss guys wanted nothing to do with her. But Brian, let's talk about your recruiting. We've got about 10 more minutes or so. You by the time you're a junior and certainly your senior year, you're on everybody's radar because of your accomplishments, and rightfully so. And talk a little bit about the recruiting process. It's a lot different now than it was back in the day, but you ultimately, obviously, you went to Ball State. But how did Ball State get on your radar? Talk to us a little bit about the recruiting process for kickers, which is, I think, different than other positional players.
The recruiting process was awful only because I was very, very impatient and I didn't put a lot of faith and trust in God, in which I should have. And my parents told me to do that a bunch. And I tell kids to be nice to their parents all the time at camps, because my parents were just so nice to me and worked their tails off for me outside of their jobs and all that. And I was just so impatient and thought I should be getting all these offers. And, I had other Division 1 AA schools and D2 schools that had contacted me, and I just stubbed my nose to it. And it was just not ideal. And so it was tough to get looks because we weren't getting a whole lot of kicks, but I had enough kicks with the team and enough game film to get some significant interest. And then Coach Latta and then Coach Dubose, both of them vouched for me when they were contacted. But back then, and it's so funny talking about VHS tapes and DVDs to kids these days, because I was in the, just like, you and everyone else, we were in the VHS tape era. And then you go into the DVD area, and then now we're, you can send a message on Twitter and possibly get a look in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And so my parents were like, look, let's go to the computer room in the house. Let's put up massive poster paper, because you got to think we weren't working Google Docs and Google Sheets in 99 and 2000. So we just had a bunch of paper up, and we brainstormed together and put 50 schools on the left-hand side column. And on the top row going across, we'd put phone call, a physical letter. Did you visit the school? Did you get an offer? We had probably 15 different columns on that row. And then essentially the 50 schools that we picked were 15 Division 1 schools, 10 Division 1 D1 AA schools, and then several Division 2, Division 3 schools. And then we were able to see, as we were getting letters and phone calls and all that kind of stuff, you were able to kind of see which schools showed you the most interest. And so long story short, my senior year, back at least in 99 to 2003 days, it was hey, hey, John, you're our number 1 kicker. Hey, Brian, you're our number 2 kicker. We offered the number 1 guy. He has 2 weeks to commit to us. If at 2 weeks he doesn't commit, you're our next guy. Be ready to be on the phone to get the offer. And so that happened to me with Louisiana Tech, with Coach Levine. And that guy that got offered before me, he waited the full 2 weeks. And so that was the toughest 2 weeks ever, because I was in September in my senior year. And because I really liked Louisiana Tech. We went and visited the school there, and I really enjoyed it. Josh Scobie was the kicker who played in the NFL for many years. So I got to see him and meet him. So when I got that call, basically saying, hey, look, our number 1 guy committed to us yesterday, good luck to you. We'll still be in contact. That really I was like, this is it. it's over. Southern Miss came in the picture a week later. Exact same process happened. The number one guy committed 10 days in. So basically, like in October, I thought like this is like for sure this is over. And that's kind of when things like hit a stall for a couple weeks. Troy, we tried our hardest to get Troy involved because they're an hour down the road, and they really heavily recruited like the Panhandle area and Florida with kickers. And so it was just kind of weird that I didn't get a call from them. But Ball State called out of nowhere in late October, and I thought they were a Division III school, and I made the error and mistake by making that comment to Coach Carlson, who called me, and foot and mouth, and he's like, son, we're playing against Randy Moss on ESPN2 this week in the MAC conference, so we're actually a Division 1A school, so we actually have 20,000 people at Ball State. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. And so we did our research. We talked to Coach Dubose. They offered us like a week later, and I committed 4 days after that. So by mid-November, I was committed to Ball State. To the first coaching staff, Coach Lynch and Coach Carlson, I was committed to them. They ended up being let go in December, and then Brady Hoke and company came in and they honored all of our scholarships that were offered. And so we got to go up and do another visit, and I was able to meet him. He honored scholarships. And so, I was committed to Ball State. And that's kind of what led into the issues with the soccer team, because the soccer guys were like, okay, like you're our attacking central mid, you've been our guy that dishes the ball out, also scores, dad's coach, yada, yada. Like, are you going to play? And because they thought like I was worried about, risking like a knee injury or something. And I was like, guys, I'm playing. Like, we have a chance to go to state again, for soccer. So that was really the only kind of deal where they were like, now that you have a football scholarship for college, are you going to play or not play? And I'm like, I'm playing. So, that's kind of how the recruiting thing went.
It's interesting that you say that, because, you can either sign in the back in the day in November time period, or you signed in February. And when I signed with Vanderbilt, that was in February, and I still had my baseball season to go. And there was a lot of discussion. Well, you're going to play baseball? Well, yeah, I'm going to play baseball. That's my love. That's my number one sport. I never thought twice about it, but there is a lot of conversation about that, about playing other sports after you sign. Well, Brian, we got a couple more minutes, but I do want to talk about your kicking coaching and the kids like Jack Martin, a former Northview kicker. He's at Troy. He just was honored with, I think, Sunbelt Special Teams Player of the Week, or I don't want to state that wrong, but I know he was just honored for his great kicking this past week. So talk a little bit about your coaching of kids and some kids who may be in college right now.
Yeah, after Ball State, I played there 4 years, started all 46 games there as the field goal kickoff guy, and actually had 10 punts in my career there. I got an opportunity to go to Chicago Bears rookie camp in May of 2007 with Coach Lovie Smith. Pro Bowl kicker of the year, Robbie Gould, came back. So I was just trying to be a camp leg. Did well in rookie camp, didn't get the camp leg gig. So I then found myself in the arena football realm and played 9 years of arena football and kicked on, 9 foot of uprights, which can be a nightmare sometimes. But that's when I started my kicking academy. I had a lot of, it's very, very narrow. But in 2009, when I was in my second arena football season, I had people in Spokane, Washington asking me to train, if I did training lessons. And so I was like, my dad is a great kicking coach. I'd like to be one. I kind of know some things, and then my brother is a great soccer player and he liked it. So that's kind of how I came up with Team Jackson Kicking, because in my mind, I was thinking, eventually when I come back to the Wiregrass, my dad, myself, my brother will start training kickers. And so Team Jackson Kicking is how it got formulated. As I made my way back to Dothan in 2010, I got a job out at Fort Rucker, but I was still able to play arena football with the Huntsville team and the New Orleans team and the Orlando team while I was working out at Fort Rucker. That's when I started training kids a lot. And so, probably notably Northview guys, Kobe Neenan was phenomenal. Jack Martin was phenomenal. Kobe just got to kick off a couple weeks ago for UAB. He was at Tulane on full scholarship, got his bachelor's degree, and now he's finished, or he's starting on his master's at UAB,
Good
and
for
he'll
him.
probably get to play again next year because of the eligibility.
Right.
So he was phenomenal. Jack Martin was phenomenal. And so I'd always told Jack, I'm like, dude, records are meant to be broken, man. Like, you need to get my record. You need to tell that coach, hit a 55-yarder. Like, let's beat the record. And I think he hit a 53 in his career at Northview. But yeah, it's been really fun to watch him. He's doing a great job at Troy, and he's got such a high ceiling. And I really do believe that he has a great opportunity to kick in the NFL in a couple of years. But obviously we have a lot of work to do still yet.
Well, Brian, do you think we're going to see 70-yard kicks soon?
So Joey Sly from the Panthers got a 67-yard attempt.
I saw that.
And he actually had the distance, and it was windy. But we'll see it. We'll see it in the next couple of years. Someone's going to get a similar situation, 2 seconds into the end of the half, 2 seconds into the game, or something like that, and it's going to be a windy, or it's going to be in Denver or something like that. And these guys these days, it's kind of like funny when people are saying like, the 40 is the new 50 or whatever, like for age or whatever that saying is. Field goal kicking, like these 50 yards to these guys is like an extra point.
Right. Right.
However, I tell these kids all the time, college and high school guys, 38 to 43 yards. All right, 38 yards was the average make in the NFL last year, and 43 yards was the average miss in the NFL last year. So I just harped these young guys all the time, like, you have to hone in on your inside 40 kicks and your mid-range 40s if you want to be a starter and if you want to play.
Brian, I learned so much tonight. Thank you for sharing your story, your expertise, your enthusiasm. I wish I'd have gotten to see you kick back in the day, but I know you're doing some great things for a lot of young kickers. So thank you for what you're doing to encourage the sport to keep growing.
Thank you so much for letting me be on. It's been really fun.
Absolutely. And guys, arguably one of the greatest kickers in Northview history, certainly record holder, and just had so much success on and off the field. Brian Jackson was with us tonight. And I want to thank everybody who was, Ryan Williams. I'm sorry I didn't mention some of the guys who scrolled through here. Ryan Williams popped on. So thank you, Ryan. Guys, we're going to keep doing these. We've got Ron Ingram next week. If you don't know Ron is one of the legends throughout the state. He, at the time in the 80s and early 90s, he was a sports reporter in the Southeast or in the Wiregrass. Now he is with the Alabama High School Athletic Association in their public relations, I think. And just, this is the kind of man who can tell you details upon any game. It's just incredible. And Ron's going to be very, very informative. But thank you guys for tuning in with Brian tonight. And we're going to keep doing this. Y'all stay safe, and we'll see you next Wednesday night. Y'all have a good night. Good week.
Go Cougars.